my dream is to discover novel diseases or discover diseases that have not been discovered yet. And I'm lucky enough, I have discovered some of them, but it's my absolute goal and dream to discover more of them.
Hello and welcome to the podcast From Noise to Sound, presented from Hochschule Luzern. I'm Dimitrios Marinos, and I had in the past numerous podcasts already done, and I have some which are already not presented. But this one is a very special and personally also to me. I have together with me, she's a very interesting person. She's a professor in child immunology at the University of Zurich. She has around 7,000 citations, so her work is the basis of work for others around the globe on her domain. And she has a lab on her name. So I'm very much excited to deep dive together with you and listen to her story and perhaps get a little bit more inspiration also for what she's doing on her daily work, but also how is she as a person. So let's dive on this one together. Welcome, Professor Dr.Dr.Jana Pachlopnik. Hi, Jana.
Hi, Dimi.
I'm really, really excited that you are here today. It was a session that I was really looking forward for. As I mentioned in my intro, you have a background, you're doing in child immunology, you're a professor in the University of Zurich. So for me, the first logical question is, what is your domain exactly? What is something that you focus so much with your team in your lab? And it's very relevant to us mere humans.
So thank you for having me here. It's a real pleasure. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion. My main topic is pediatric immunology. So we are interested to provide children with genetic errors of the immune system. So they lack or they have a part of the immune system that doesn't function, to provide them with the best targeted treatment.
Mm-hmm. But question for me, is it all so? I mean, of course I'm not a doctor, but I'm allowed to make some silly questions today on this segment for sure. So for me, is it so much different, pediatric immunology to, let's say, adult immunology?
Yes, I think so, because we focus on inborn errors. So something that is inherited, the child is born with, and usually in childhood, if the disease already shows in childhood, it means that it's a very severe one.
Okay. So in your experience, how far are we on such, let's say, anomalies or errors, as you mentioned, by birth, or something that happens in children in terms of immunology, in terms of medicine today, let's say, or where do you think this journey of correcting those quote errors is going to be?
So I don't know where we are, but I have realized that we made some huge steps, or not we, but the community, in detecting genetic diseases. There is or was a huge step with this next generation sequencing by the fact that we are able to sequence the whole genome of a person, and this made a real difference. But now it comes our task to translate this into knowing what the gene does and how we can treat or even cure the disease.
So how much, you're doing a lot of work in your lab. As I noticed in the internet, you have a lab with your name, which is actually very, very, it shows how eminent, also how central your work is also for the university as well. First of all, also for your team, I would say it shows that this is something which is really targeted for the work that you're doing. But how much, I don't know, but I would guess one side, of course, is the research that you do with your team, and the other side is a little bit the pharma part. I mean, you're doing all the work that someone finds and detects the errors and anomalies, but then you need the hand of pharma to give you the tools and the production-ready medicine. So how is this link actually works?
So maybe a step back.
Sure.
So the unit I'm like the head of is based on 3 pillars. One is the clinic. The second is the diagnostic lab, which is also eminently important. And the third is the research lab. And all these 3 units together are interlinked, and it's very important that we work closely together. And the other part, how can we translate something that we find in research, or how can we get it back to the patient, so from the bench to the bedside? And I was lucky enough that with something I had done during my PhD, I could follow this path really very closely. I have done some experiments with mice and realized that something that we detected there could be used in humans. And I was Googling whether there is a pharma company producing this compound, and we found a startup in Switzerland.
Really?
Yes.
Well,
and contacted them and asked them whether we could use their product for our rare immunodeficiency. And it was very nice to see how this then developed, actually without us being very active anymore. But they took it, and it was like a model disease for them.
Crazy.
To show that their compound has activity.
So you approach the startup instead of vice versa. Usually it's vice versa. The startups have something that they feel is the sexiest thing in the world, and they come to the researchers or the hospitals to prove it. So actually, it would be a good idea. I'm for lots of startups. Now that you give it as a hint, but for me, it's also. Have you been ever frustrated in this research part? I mean, you have the clinical part, so you have, let's say, the real image, what's happening inside the hospital, what comes in as patients, and your work, which is a bit more isolated, let's say, isolated. I don't like the word, but someone a bit closer inside the lab. Have you ever been, I mean, everyone who's done for research has been frustrated. I know for myself at least. And how do you move on with it? With your team along, because you're not alone. I mean, we're not in these times anymore. So how do you wake up in the morning and say, although it's hard, it's difficult, the team is frustrated, we don't move on, but this thing exists somehow, you have a gut feeling. How do you move on there?
I don't know. I hear from people that I am like this Duracell.
The battery.
I mean, I get sometimes frustrated, that's true. But I think when you are at the bottom, then there is ground, and you can use it to jump up again.
Yeah, that's for sure. In the research, you are in bottom. There's nothing, you have a foundation only, nothing more until you prove you can jump. Yeah, but this is really, really interesting on one side. I wanted to ask you a little bit about, you have definitely some trends, right? So you've spoken about children immunology. This is your fact. So, we are now in 2025. Have you seen a strange development on children immunology, let's say over 100 years or something that changed over the course of years for some particular reason?
So it's maybe not our domain of focus, because we are really focusing on genetic diseases. It's true that behavior will have an influence, but it's more the behavior of consanguineous marriages. So people, when they marry between cousins.
Oh, really?
Then,
yeah, that's for sure.
of course, they have more inherited disease, or the risk that there is an inherited disease is bigger than in other marriages.
I would assume that in 2025 we have less on these cases than we had 50 years before.
Yeah, I don't know. Honestly, there are regions in the world where this is still common practice because of cultural reasons.
Yeah, I would think so, but this definitely wouldn't cross my mind in 2025. Nevertheless, but I think, I mean, to inherit something, let's say to the children, one side is genetics, but one other side is that, let's say, parents or elder or the parents had a different type of lifestyle. How much the lifestyle comes to genetics in order to be inherited to the children? I mean, for example, if I was drinking a lot, smoking a lot, I don't know, abusing myself a lot in these terms, how much of that would have an impact, let's say, in genetics for my children?
Probably not the expert to answer this question, honestly. Of course, the environment does something to the genes, but it's not my area of expertise. I'm sorry.
No worries, no worries. Yeah. I'm just thinking a bit loud on this because this is this is the teaser that we get from the media. Usually, take care of the lifestyle so that everyone is safe in these practices. So, in one side, I think if you think a little bit on the child immunology, let's say itself, so you have a child that's inherited something. So now you're let's say in your research trying to find out, well, first of all, what was this? Have you noticed, let's say, from your research, patterns that make you think, that, for example, things change, let's say, in genes, or that things that is inherited are more frequently than I was expecting or we have seen before in the research?
I was just thinking back what you asked of the influence of the environment. So I think what our area of interest are extreme cases. So if you imagine a Gaussian distribution of a reaction, so we would probably, with a, let's say, normal immune system, would be somewhere in the middle. So our immune system reacts as a lot of other immune systems do. And then there are people who are at the extremes of this Gaussian distribution, and we learn from those ones what happens because they do have something that is completely lacking. And by this, we learn the function of this by reversion. If this is lacking, then this leads to hyperinflammation or increased susceptibility to infection or increased susceptibility to cancer. And we can then, from this, deduce what this means for a normal immune system, because the normal immune system there, the environment has much more influence because it's like in balance, and it's a network. And if you influence this, then it will just change as a network. And
I think also in these terms, how positive, or let's say, if we have to be positive, otherwise you wouldn't do this job, I would say, as a doctor, let's say. But going back to that, when you have some genetic change as a child, or this happens, I'm not deep in this, the research, but we usually read also in the media and the news that there will be medicines that are very much tailored to your genetics and the child genetics, and that will, let's say, correct the errors or even avoid later on, let's say, if something evolves in terms of cancer, it will help later on. So how positive you are on that, because that would be a very big thing.
Oh, yes. I think that's really the future, because now we are working with these extremes where there's a complete lack of something. But what we all have, everybody has changes or things that variance in the genetic landscape. And I think it's then important to look at the combination of these different variants, and this will then give, as a result, the behavior, or at least a part of the behavior, explain a lot, at least a part of the behavior of the immune system. So the combination of these different variants, I think there we are really at the beginning of understanding. Yeah,
okay. I thought
we are maybe strong if we have one gene, but the combination of different ones, I would say we are quite at the beginning.
At the beginning, okay. I had the feeling from what one reads that we are not at the beginning, not in the end, of course, at the same time. And on the same time, these things require, this type of research, these things to be, to be released, production ready, it requires a lot of effort, one side, and I would also say a lot of money from the pharmas, from the governments, perhaps something more holistic in this term. So it's not that easy, even if it's someone starts. So
and it needs some brains as well.
Oh, now you're picking up something which is really interesting to me. So we were discussing before starting the podcast about the students. Let's say maybe you are teaching also in the university as well in Zurich. So there is a lot of interest from students to study medicine. Not everyone makes it on one side. On the other side, like in every study, let's say, as you mentioned, there's a Gaussian bell there as well. There's the students that are good somehow, and they take their certificates, and they're doctors on the end or engineers at the end. But there's some people on the sides. This one side, of course, that didn't manage, and on the other side, the brains. How often do you think we have this amount of, let's say, capacity in order to drive such things, or do you count on AI? Let's say, let me be a little bit more provocative.
I think we live and we use computers not as a part of our body, but somehow we cohabitate with them.
I would argue, if you see this in young generations, I would say it might be a part of our body.
So I think let's use them. We have them.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to use them. But I think also for a doctor or a medical doctor, you are this and you use the whole of your body. It's not only your thoughts and what you have memorized during your studies, but it's what you feel, how you feel the patient when you touch him or her. What's the smell? Mm-hmm. What's the emotional vibes around? So as a doctor, you need to capture all of this.
Uh-huh. Well, I think that happens mostly, I would say, in your field. Let's say you need that. If you're not a people's person, you're never going to have the skill, right? If you're an engineer writing code behind a PC, if you feel the vibe of yes or not, probably doesn't really matter that much. But if you're a doctor, as you mentioned, that is very relevant. So for me, also the point is, studies is one thing, and the other is the interpersonal. So have you, do you teach that as well? Do you try to provoke people? Because I could assume the brains usually are very introverts, right? So, or not so extrovert.
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Mm-hmm. Do you try also to show that this side of medicine, this side in your work is so relevant?
Yeah, it's absolutely needed. You need to cultivate this also. It's your profession.
It's profession.
It's what I told you. We have groups of 6 students where we show them that's how you have to touch the patient. This cannot be done in an auditorium with 200 people. You really have to show this one by one.
Definitely not over Zoom.
No, not over Zoom.
Yeah, I could assume. Yeah. No.
But I also think that medicine is a very interesting way of, or is an interesting curriculum, because at the end of the studies, you do have a profession.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. Then you can do this at least very at a lot of places in this world, and there is a huge spectrum of what you can do. I mean, you can study mummies, and you can do pediatrics, you can study medical history. I mean, it's really, really very, very broad. So I think even for someone who realizes during the studies, it's not my thing to touch patients. There are a lot of other things. And also the computer stuff and AI and bioinformatics, all of this comes more and more, and it still needs also medical knowledge.
Of course, I would argue also, I mean, I'm coming from IT, I would argue that you can take it out. I mean, you can be faster, but I would argue that it's definitely not something yet you can replace people, let's say, in that one, because the human interaction is what it makes. I mean, I may remember a little bit of my personal story when I came to the hospital and had my son screaming around, and you were really focused. I mean, this is laser focus. So I was thinking to myself, if I was at her position, I wouldn't be able to think, because you have someone crying one side and one other side, someone has to think and be professional. So how do you manage this kind of stress? I mean, this is also for me very interesting. And you spoke about these three pillars. I mean, the research, the university, and the clinic. So when going back to clinic a little bit, so there's a lot of stress. You see a lot of cases. Someone's is easier to manage, and someone not very easy to manage. So how do you manage the psychological burden and the stress when this thing comes? Because one of the things when I thinking about your profession, it's exactly like the psychological burden and the stress that comes from real situations. Not like I have a problem with my boss because the numbers are not right. Here you have humans behind. How do you manage that?
Oh, I don't know. It's what I realized. I always thought you're not as good in pediatrics if you don't have own kids. But I realized it's completely different. It's absolutely the contrary, or it was in my case. When I had my son, I was so emotional about everything, what was going on in clinics. I mean, and I then realized, come on, it doesn't help anybody if you're just freaking out because a child is not doing well, and because you're so attached. Yeah. It needs a bit. Yeah, it needs a professional, not distance. It's another approach. It's not.
I would say experience. It comes with the time, as we say. I mean, if you're a young doctor after 2 years of medical, I mean, it's obvious that it will be in your skin. Let's say somehow.
And it also, what helps is to see role models, how others act in these stressful situations. And then you just copy them, and then you realize, okay, this feels somehow okay-ish.
Mm-hmm. What was your role model then?
Oh, I have several ones. I have seen doctors in my life where I think, wow, that's just amazing. This person is just amazing.
In terms of knowledge or
everything? So that's the holistic. Yeah. They know a lot. They know how to talk to people. They know how to behave. They are really in their element. They are so passionate about. I mean, that's really nice.
That's nice and rare, I would say, not only for I mean, at least at your sector is something that you see more often than other sectors, because you know the burden of studying medicine. It's not like I'm studying 2-3 years and I'll have a degree. You know, it's a long journey. So if you don't like it, it's not going to work long term. So you see people that like their work a lot more, and I think this is something that I've really noticed. Let's say the last years. As well, and that's nice to see that people have this empathy and they develop this empathy. And although the situations are difficult, you keep this professionalism, as you mentioned, on the tough times. So when I go a little bit back to Jana as a person, right? So why are you standing in the morning from bed? I mean, what motivates you? I mean, of course, the clinical side. I mean, you're helping people. I understand all that. But I mean, being there, done that. Now, what motivates? What's the next thing? What motivates you to keep on moving? Because you have to study. You have to be on top of what you do.
I must confess a bit. I'm not standing up in the morning to help anybody. Honestly, I think one should remain egoist in a good way.
Mm-hmm.
Only do things if it's your intrinsic motivation to do it. Not because you want to have something back, but because you like to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's super important for
And that
everybody.
reflects,
Yeah.
that reflects also in your work, I would say. I mean, you wouldn't be that far. I mean, in the same time, I mean, you have a team which is engaged, as I've seen at least, and you should, or you are for them, be the role model as you had others. I mean, it's not that common. I mean, if you reach your level, that's in any case. But for me, it's also, how do you train the next generation? I mean, how do you, let's say, when you are in the university or you're in a clinic or you're in research, how do you feel, okay, I mean, I spot some talent here. I mean, of course, if you're teaching, let's say, you try to have everyone equal, but sometimes it is unfair also if you something which is an outlier, let's say, and you say, now this person, I can take this person to the next level. How do you do that? Or do you do that?
Oh, I was lucky enough that these persons approached me. I have several students now already who, let's say, after a lecture or after a course, just came to me and said, "That's what I want to do." And then I think, yes, okay, then come.
And that's actually, it speaks for itself, because that's also a thing, right? You have to have it in your personality, because you do three things. I mean, a researcher can be dry, but a professor, let's say, cannot be. I mean, you have to be engaging. If you can be very good on your profession, I mean, on the underline, but not being able to teach very, very, and then bring the knowledge to the students. But
I don't know. I just try to show what drives me. I try to sparkle what is so fascinating for me, and that's driving me already since ever. Just I think it's fascinating to see this gene encodes for this protein, and this happens then on the level of the organism if it is lacking. And by reversion, this tells us this is the function of this protein. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I can speak also, let's say, from I'm not for the medical experience, but my personal experience. I mean, we think of proteins as something like really basic and can have a very, very severe sometimes, or it can have also an impact. I mean, a small protein that we just think, hey, this protein is not something very complex, let's say, from us, from, the mere humans. How much impact can have, let's say, in the quality of life of a person, in its development when we talk about children, and also really, I mean, we are in 2025 just for a person today to explore its full potential, just from a protein.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm just trying to stretch it a little bit, but I think it's not that trivial also. I mean, what you do, I'm seeing just finding a protein and reversing it, or really trying to find the mechanism to cope with it. It's really about quality of life, isn't it?
Oh, yes, it is. Yeah. I have experienced the first patients who were given these biotherapies and who had been suffering for years and years. And they just told me, hey, I think the sun is going up for me the first time in my life. And it's so beautiful because it really can change if you target the right pathway, then it can really change the life because they get feel just much better.
No, much better. It happens, as I mentioned, it's quality of life, and you take new shots for life. Let's say, I mean, if you have difficulties, you're feeling tired or whatever, or you have fevers. I mean, it's something you're very much researching on it. I'm saying it very generic. Sorry for that. As I mentioned, I'm not a doctor. But for me, it's also interesting. I was very critical before my case. I was very critical on those research. and all these medicines are too expensive. Why should it be so expensive? I understand it from the business side, but on the same side, until I realized, yes, these cases that you are actually, as you mentioned in this Gaussian belt, checking the extremes or the very much the ones which are very rare. If you get in this situation, you're happy that it exists in any case, right? So, what's your view on that in terms of the pharmaceuticals part of things, and not only the research on the solution side of things,
It just it might be that this disease is very rare. So in less than 1% or less than 0.001% of people. But if you have it 100%.
Yeah,
that's always what we say.
That actually mathematically makes a lot of sense, because actually, if it comes to you, and I think there's never, as I realized it for myself, there's never one case. So you have, in my case, the medicine was more or less very much, you could use it for other reasons. It just happens to be something that fits in that. And at the same time, so I think it might be a little bit of one size fit a little bit more.
No, but I think that's a very nice example of how rare disease can help also for other things. I mean, the medication has been developed for rare disease because it has been seen that, yes, we have to intervene here in this pathway. And now it can be used also for other diseases, which are in the same pathway somehow, maybe milder. But I think this is a really nice example.
Yeah. I mean, it's very interesting to me, because I thought for myself, these things will happen. Will always, due to their lifestyles, this will always start to become more. But I think technology there will help. Technology, I'm not meaning of AI, but this targeted medicine, let's say that if you have a basis and know where the problem is through research like you do, then the people in the pharmaceuticals can find a way with the right tools to cure that. But when I just going, a little bit back again to you. What would you make you, let's say, excited to see? This is what I discovered now. If we put, let's say, if we had to put a label on something, not your research, I would like to find that. I would like to know that. What would it be? I know it's a little bit stupid question, but it's a little bit on the research side. I'm for researching somebody. I would really like to find that.
So my dream is
that's the question.
to discover novel diseases or discover diseases that have not been discovered yet. And I'm lucky enough, I have discovered some of them, but it's my absolute goal and dream to discover more of them.
Perfect. That's what I was looking for, more or less. But I think you and your team, you're doing a great job in these terms, and I think the system supports you there a lot.
Oh, yes.
Now, just a question for me. You studied a lot, and have you ever noticed? Let's say now there is a lot of discussion about any accessibility problem. Let's say in terms of how tough it was for you this research world as a woman. Let's say, or it wasn't as much. Because I remember, let's say, years past, that has been an issue. If you go even further down the road with Marie Curie, even more. This is a brilliant example. But have you noticed, let's say, or have you ever felt like an outlier?
So I had also role models in my family. So my mother, my grandmother, or grandmothers, they all were working. So I think that's one important thing in my life. And then the other one is men who are feminists. My father always said, I'm a feminist. And I'm lucky enough that my husband is also very, very supportive. Without that, it would not have been not possible to do a career like that. Really not.
Absolutely. But I mean, as a question perhaps reflected from my side. I mean, I've written also in your profile and everything. I mean, I have a migration background, so I've studied a lot, painfully a lot, and tried my best to integrate, but also to reach, to grow. I mean, you do the extra mile, and this is a little bit bounded sometimes in your psyche, let's say.
Yeah.
And I mean, seeing a little bit your background as well, having all these studies and PhDs and everything, has this also impacted, I mean, you to strive a lot, so much what you do?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of, you say, I'm very grateful for what I have been able to do. So my parents were refugees from the Eastern country, from Czech Republic, and they came to Switzerland, and I was lucky enough to be born in Switzerland. But I'm aware of the luxury we have and the great opportunities we have here, and I'm just fortunate enough to be able to use this.
Absolutely. I mean, it's all worked out for you. That is for sure. And I really hope from my heart that you keep doing the work you do with your team and try, excel on what you do. I mean, you do it obviously in a very high level and with the right colleagues and partners. And I wish you definitely all the best.
Thank you very much.
From my heart on that. So that was, let's say, the episodes with Professor Dr. Jana Pachlopnik. Jana, thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you so much.
Giving us all this insight. I mean, first of all, to understand maybe what you're doing on one side, but also to getting to know you as a person, because for me it was both very important. It's not, what you do, we can read on one side. It's better, of course, to hear it from you directly. But behind all this research, there's a fascinating person as well. And I think that is something that came out to me as well in this podcast. Thank you really much a lot.
Thank you for this opportunity. And I hope I could sparkle a little bit.
Yes, of course. I think the people can reflect. Definitely. I mean, not everyone has to do the journey that you have done. It's definitely painful. But I think one of the key messages also for me, it's if you strive on that, you can definitely, nothing is easy. So if you strive a lot and you do the work that's been done and you have a little bit of a lack in motivation and the right people around you, then everything is possible and achievable. And I hope this keeps on working for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you as well. So for us, I hope you enjoyed it as well, Jana. It's introduction, but also the input from Jana. We'll be together also in the next month with the next podcast. Please send us also your feedback, but also your messages on or whom should we invite next, or stay in touch with us in LinkedIn, where I have the possibility also to give you some other insights and more information about various topics, let's say, that I think it's very current in the more in the business, but also social world. So thanks a lot for staying with us, and I wish you all the best, and until the next time.